is the starting lineup. Here's your host, Karl Schoening.
Welcome into the starting lineup. I'm Karl Schoening, starting at your host, and the voice coming through your speakers. It's a two-man starting lineup today. As usual, our audio technician on the other side, making sure everything sounds good, it looks good. Whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on Ticket 760, LG, what's going on?
What's up? I always look good, just to let you know.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's the beauty of the way we do it here on the starting lineup. Obviously, we love it if you join us on the starting lineup live on YouTube. We appreciate our radio audience. We have a good one for you today. We're going to talk some NBA playoffs, NFL draft. Game 5 between the Spurs and the Blazers is where I want to start. But, you know, the 24-hour news cycle, there's some interesting things that always pop up. And originally, I wasn't going to mess with this, but I did want to touch on something that you and I were talking a little bit off air about, LG, and that is this Victor Wembanyama concussion situation. And I need to preface this by saying I don't really want to speculate on too many things because nothing that's really come out has been something worth speculating on, etc. Wemby doesn't really want to talk about it. He doesn't want it to be a distraction. But
not until the season's over, at least.
Yeah, and there's probably legitimate criticisms for players that have to go through the concussion protocol that they can provide. It sounds like that might be the case where Wemby has some feedback that whether it's good or bad, I'm sure Wemby has some feedback on how the process went. But something that really caught my ear yesterday when I was doom scrolling Twitter was Sean Sharania was on the Pat McAfee show. And Pat McAfee, someone who I'm sure has gotten a concussion or two in his day, even as a punter in football, he asked about the situation with Wemby and the concussion. And we got that sound for you. Go ahead and play it, LG.
Point blank period. Victor Wembanyama and the Spurs believed he was cleared to play in Game 3. Wemby, he said it to Malik Andrews after the game. He was unhappy, like he was pissed. He was frustrated he wasn't able to play in Game 3, and I think that's where a lot of the frustration goes. But listen, the reality is concussion protocol. You have to get sign-off from your own team doctors, which supposedly happened on Friday, but then you also got to get sign-off from the league. And there's a league concussion protocol director that's involved here too. So Victor Wembanyama obviously aired out his frustrations about it. He didn't want to go too in-depth, but I'm here to tell you guys, he felt he was cleared to play Friday. He felt like the Spurs doctors had cleared him to play, and that's why the frustration comes into play when the league decides he wasn't. But listen, even when he was cleared on Sunday, it was 116-ish hours post-concussion. And so, the league, if you're going to clear a guy 3 days post-concussion, that is a quick recovery. But listen, there's a reason why Wemby is called the alien.
Yeah, there is. In fact, it's so funny. He goes on to basically say that Wemby recovers quickly, and at the end of the season, Wemby hurt his ribs, and that was the question of will Wemby play, because he needed to play at least one more game in his final 3 after hurting his ribs to get eligible for the 65-game minimum requirement for regular season award voting. And Harrison Barnes was asked about it, and Harrison was great, and he obviously gave a very political answer. I'm not going to tip our hat. There's things that he's been told he can't really say, whether that was the Spurs. I want to say he made he alluded to that the league has told them, hey, don't really talk about anybody's availability, and that seems to be probably just a good business practice. But
yeah, you don't want to let your opponents know. Let them keep thinking until the moment you actually announce it.
Yeah, and that's sort of where I need to also preface this with, I'm someone who's been diagnosed with a severe concussion in my life. I don't think that they're anything to be trifled with. I am very curious about concussions and what we're learning about how they affect your brain. There was that Will Smith movie, Concussion, obviously. It was dramatized a little bit, but it was based off of a documentary called A League in Denial. And there's certain ways that we sort of rank how these concussions go. And it's from somewhere in that documentary, A League in Denial, where they said, hey, they asked a football player, how about if we defined a concussion as the ringing in the ears? They said in response, then players probably get 3 concussions of football practice. And there's so much that we're learning about what goes into how concussions work that I think it's changed the way that we've played basketball. It's definitely changed the way we've played much more high contact sports where you could almost call them collision sports, such as football and hockey. Those are 2 sports that have really developed protective gear for these players that are going to get their heads banged in a few times. The NBA and basketball doesn't necessarily have that issue, but to the point of me being sort of fascinated about concussions, look up Dwayne Wade wearing visors. I'm sure that would probably be a sufficient Google search. He had to wear visors for 2 or 3 games, maybe even 5, when he was with the Heat. And I'm talking probably over a decade ago now. And he made them look so cool. I think it was one of the coolest little fashion statements that he should have just kept going, but he wore it due to light sensitivity. And the first game that he wore those visors, they were so dark that you couldn't read his eyes. And the league had to come in and say, hey, that's an unfair advantage. You need to brighten them up a little bit. You might not be able to find the original visors that D-Wade wore for his concussion, but I digress. I just kind of wanted to touch on this because I find it to be a very interesting topic. I think a lot of people find it to be an interesting topic. It is very interesting that Shams, from what he has gathered, is that he said it in the interview with McAfee, point blank. Wemby thought that he was going to be playing on Game 3. He obviously doesn't, and it ends up being a moot point because it almost could be considered a blessing in disguise for the Spurs that Wemby got to rest Game 3, came back, had a dominant performance Game 4. The Spurs can close it out tonight. 8:30 tip-off on the Spurs radio network. I'll be on the broadcast with Dan Weiss. Spurs Radio Game Night getting started at 8 o'clock on Big Brother Down the Hall, WOAI. But, really, the one game that got away from the Spurs was the last time they played at the Frost Bank Center, Game 2, and Wemby went down just past the 9-minute mark in the second quarter, and that was a game the Spurs should have won. This could have very easily been a sweep, all things considered, and obviously the 106-103 victory for the Blazers, their only win of the series so far when they tied it up at a game apiece, was the only real reason that we're playing this Game 5 here in San Antonio tonight. So I think the Spurs need to come out strong and just destroy any will that the Blazers have left. Don't let them muster up any confidence because there's going to be a little bit of confidence that is there for Portland because they're NBA players, they're elite athletes. There's a certain degree of confidence that you're just going to always walk around with if you are one of the top athletes in the world. It just, you don't get to this point of athletic ability without that sort of confidence that's unshakable. But the Spurs need to shake it right away and just put this game to sleep at the half instead of trailing at the half like they did in the first or the last 2 games in Portland. They need to come out, be definitive, and make sure that this isn't a game come third quarter, fourth quarter to the best of their ability. And obviously that's easier said than done, but I just feel like that would be a key there for the Spurs. And, LG, Wemby has said it several times. The doctors were great. I do the injury report for the Spurs before every single broadcast. And granted, a good chunk of the season, there were several times where the only players on the injury report were actually on G League two-way assignment, the two-way players. But the injury report today, because they don't have to include two-way players, said for the first time all season long, nothing to report.
Just empty.
Yes. There were no names, and that's just the thing of beauty because the Spurs are very fortunate that there haven't been any injuries that will put anybody on that list. And when you look around the rest of the league, a lot of teams are being beat up pretty bad. And in fact, we'll get to it in the next segment, but the Spurs' next opponent, the Nuggets or the Timberwolves, whichever one ends up winning that series, as the Nuggets took Game 6 last night, or they forced a Game 6 and avoid being gentlemen swept by the Timberwolves, who are without Anthony Edwards. The Spurs' next opponent is going to be a pretty banged up team, assuming they close out tonight and Portland doesn't somehow come back from down 3-1, which I obviously don't think is a likely scenario. But, it's hard to really define keys for the Spurs because they have so many ways that they can win. If somebody's not having a good night, another player is going to step up. This team is too deep for every single player to have an off night. If Julian Champagny isn't feeling it, then Devin Vassell probably is. If Devin Vassell isn't feeling it, then Harrison Barnes is probably getting his shot going. There's all those sharpshooters on the wings that Brian Wright has put around Victor Wembanyama, really smart. And then you have the three-headed ball-handling monster in Dylan Harper and obviously De'Aaron Fox, who is probably the Spurs' best scorer in the backcourt. Well, he's probably the best scorer in the backcourt by far. And then Dylan Harper, who just emerged on the scene. We're going to talk Dylan Harper a little bit later in the show as well. But the Spurs, once again, tip-off is at 8:30 tonight. I don't know what channel it's on TV. I don't really focus on TV, considering that I'm always going to be on the radio broadcasts. Very, very fortunate of that. Really excited to see what happens tonight when the Spurs try and close out the Blazers. There's definitely going to be a little bit more specific talk, but I really did find the whole concussion situation interesting. Very thankful that Wemby was able to come back so quickly from that, because it really is a scary thing. I don't think that you should really mess with concussions. And if the league was just erring on the side of caution because they want to protect Victor Wembanyama, totally understandable, and I understand why Wemby feels that way. But when we come back, we're going to talk about the Spurs' next potential opponent, the Timberwolves or the Nuggets, here on the Starting Lineup.
He didn't make the team, but he's in our starting lineup. Back to Karl Schoening.
It is the Starting Lineup on Ticket 760 or the Starting Lineup Live YouTube page, depending on where you're joining us. Happy you guys to join us. You can get involved in the show. You can tweet at me at OnAirKarl, or you can tweet at LG at DJLG210. LG, what are some other ways that the people can get involved with the show?
Well, we have a show page on Twitter, or X, whatever you want to call it these days, at TSL760. And then all the other social medias, Starting Lineup Live, including YouTube. So if you're on my channel watching this right now, switch on over to Starting Lineup Live on YouTube and give us a subscription there.
Awesome. Yeah. So many ways to be involved, and I'm sure we're going to eventually look into all the other social media spheres, but we draw the line at Blue Sky. We're not going over those ways.
I'm not there. I dabbled in it with the former show I used to produce, but I wasn't feeling it. We do have a Threads, Starting Lineup Live, and we do have a TikTok that's on the way.
Okay. Yeah. So, wherever you might be spending your time, we hope that you are stopping your scroll to listen to us a little bit, or maybe you're joining us while you're in your car on the way to work, what have you. I am Karl Schoening, your host, and we talk about the things that are important to San Antonio on this broadcast. But I think one of the things that's really important to San Antonio is their next opponent. And the Spurs' next opponent, that is, it's either going to be the Denver Nuggets, who extended the series and made the series 3-2, or the team that leads the Nuggets, the Minnesota Timberwolves, who are a game away from advancing in the NBA Western Conference playoffs. However, there's a big caveat there, and it's a big however. Anthony Edwards is out essentially indefinitely. There's a question of whether he can even come back in the second round. So the
They're saying
Timberwolves,
2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And that's giving it to you kindly.
That's probably game 5, depending on what happens with this game, first round series, because if the Nuggets win again in Minnesota game 6, there's a game 7. So then you're probably talking about Ant has maybe a week there from the when he got injured to the end of that series, and then maybe he comes back quickly in 2 weeks, and it's probably game 4 or game 5 of the second round series. Preferably, it'll be the Spurs, obviously, but that's our guess here on the starting lineup that the Spurs are going to close it out tonight against the Portland Trailblazers. But the Timberwolves, they're scrappy, man. They play some tough defense. Jaden McDaniels, he's one of the best wing defenders in the NBA. Rudy Gobert's one of the best rim protectors in the NBA. They make things really difficult for their opponents, especially these Denver Nuggets, Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray. But they lack the firepower to maybe win this final game because Dante DiVincenzo also was injured in game 4. That Ayo Dosunmu did come up with the 43-point win, but that lightning in a bottle did not happen again tonight. For the Timberwolves, Julius Randle finished with a team-high 27 points, but it was not enough to propel them to a victory. Dosunmu comes back to earth and has a pretty good 18-point game, but obviously not the 43-point explosion that would have helped them close out the series tonight. Jaden McDaniels does contribute a bit more offensively with 13 points, but he goes 0 for 3 from 3. And it was just an uphill climb all night long. Naz Reid had 12 points in 24 minutes, former sixth man of the year last year for the Timberwolves, but he got banged up, and it looked like he tweaked an ankle. And a lot of these guys are accumulating injuries that if it were the regular season, they might take a week off. And these are the playoffs, so obviously if they can go, they will go. You look at somebody like Kevin Durant on the other side of the bracket for the Houston Rockets. He twisted his ankle pretty bad when he just came back from what was a patellar strain. So obviously these guys, they've been going hard since October, and they are getting banged up, and the Spurs' next opponent, whether it's the Nuggets or the Timberwolves, are just going to be some guys in some bandaging out there. It is not going to be the most fair of fights, and that's a shame because I want a fair fight. I said this yesterday, and it's worth repeating. The Spurs, if they go on to win the championship, no one's going to remember that they beat Anthony Edwards-less Timberwolves or a really banged-up Denver Nuggets team in 10 years. They're just going to remember that the Spurs won the championship in 2026.
You mean they're not going to put an asterisk next to the championship on the banner?
No, only Phil Jackson can approve that asterisk, apparently. But the Spurs are going to face one of those two teams, and it's not really worrisome because if the Nuggets do somehow come back and win that series in 7, which I feel like is actually the more likely scenario, that they just pull out 3 straight against the Anthony Edwards-less and Dante DiVincenzo-less Minnesota Timberwolves, that's probably going to be the matchup. And Jaden McDaniels has really become public enemy number 1 in Denver by saying that the Nuggets don't have any elite wing defenders, and that's kind of true. It was a big free agent acquisition. A lot of teams were wondering who the Nets were going to send Cam Johnson to, and Cam Johnson had a pretty good game last night, but he has not really been worth giving up Michael Porter Jr. and picks for. You look at the players that you would think would be solid enough. Jamal Murray is playing great through some injuries that have him probably a little bit questionable, but it's not really Aaron Gordon didn't play last night. It's not really a fair, balanced team of wing defenders like the Spurs are dealing with against the Blazers right now. And I think that means that if the Spurs can, of course, outscore the Denver Nuggets, but I'm pretty sure that without little resistance, they can also lock up at least one of these 3 or 4 other guys that the Nuggets are maybe going to get something from, then yeah, I think that that's possibly a very easy second round series. And the West is as we all pictured, going to be decided between Oklahoma City and the Spurs. Any other thoughts on that one, LG? The Nuggets game, you and I were watching it here before we went live on YouTube.
Well, I'm obviously hoping that they take it to Game 7 so they can, get as exhausted as possible, and the Spurs can hopefully close out tonight at the Frost Bank Center, send the Blazers home, and they get a lot of rest before they match up against either the Nuggets or the T-Wolves.
Yeah, that would be the ideal scenario. And I guess I'm just trying to think about, in terms of travel here, would Minnesota be all that much further from?
Yes,
in terms
it would
of
be.
flying to Denver? Because Minnesota is one of those teams that might go to the Eastern Conference once they add the Seattle and Las Vegas franchises. So
yeah, Denver's about a 2-hour flight from here. So
yeah, is it? I don't think it's all that overblown though to play in the mountains. And the Timberwolves aren't in the mountains; they're just in the tundra, right?
I don't know that.
Geography
I
lesson.
really don't know that. I've never been to that area of the country before. So I hear they have weird accents.
Yeah. Everybody always talks about the altitude and how that burns your lungs a little bit. And it's a great home court advantage for Denver because they've gotten used to it. And somewhere around the third quarter, you start to feel a little bit more fatigue than usual if you're a visiting opponent. So maybe one more reason to pull for the Timberwolves there is that they won't have to deal with. I imagine by the time we hit May in Minnesota, they're dealing with balmy 70-degree days.
Oh, it must be nice.
They're finally de-thawing. Oh, no. I would not trade Texas's extreme heat for the Minnesota extreme winter.
I don't do cold.
No,
so no.
I can't do it either. Driving in this ice would just be terrible. And but here we are. That's a good thing about playing in the winter here. But I do want to quickly touch on the game that wrapped up the series last night. I don't even think I cared to watch a full quarter of Oklahoma City versus Phoenix. I know I actually did probably watch most of one game and a couple quarters of another one, but the Suns were just so outclassed here. It was an easy sweep for Oklahoma City. They come away with the Game 4 sweep in Phoenix last night, 131-122. Interestingly enough, Phoenix was actually the 7 seed. They lose that first play-in game to the Blazers, so the Blazers become the true 7 seed, and the Suns end up winning the play-in tournament Game 2 that matched them up against Oklahoma City. And yeah, your prize for winning that second play-in game is getting swept by the Oklahoma City Thunder. Of course, SGA finished with 31 points on 10 of 17 shooting, got to the free throw line 11 times, made 9 attempts, and AJ Mitchell, somebody who was in the 6th man of the year conversation, got the start and had 22 points. And Alex Caruso, always phenomenal two-way player, 14 points for Oklahoma City. Playoffs, love them.
The only sweep of the first round.
That's actually a good point there, LG. But I think it was somewhat expected. I want to shift gears and talk football. When we come back, I want to talk about, is it possible for the best player in the NFL draft to have been taken in the 7th round? I think so this year. I think so. Stick around, find out who I'm talking about when we come back on the starting lineup.
The takes are hot, even before the sun comes out. Back to the starting lineup.
I'm Karl Schoening, your host of the Starting Lineup, where we talk a lot of Spurs, San Antonio sports, all those kinds of things. But I'm going to shift gears here, talk a bit of a story that's gone nationally viral. Very interesting story where there's some questions of, did the Eagles somehow find the best prospect in this draft in the 7th round?
Wait a minute. Are you doing this because you're an Eagles homer, or is this an actual...
I am an Eagles fan. I hope we didn't lose any radio listeners there.
Or is this an actual national story that needs to be discussed on a local San Antonio radio show?
This is a very interesting story nationally, talking about 7th round pick, number 251, 251st player taken.
Wow.
Is an absolute physical specimen. We are talking about the most physical specimen that some of these NFL scouts have ever seen. His name is U.R. Bernard. He's a Nigerian farmer.
No, you are Karl Schoening.
No, yeah, right. I'm pretty sure I'm saying that right. It's U-A-R is how he spells it.
Okay.
U.R. Bernard. He has not played a snap of football.
And coincidentally, he was drafted by the Eagles.
Yeah.
That's just a coincidence, right?
Well, you know, I would probably talk about this if he weren't being drafted by the team that I cheer for, but it obviously appeared on my social media feed several times, and it is drawing national attention because this man has not played a snap of football, as I mentioned. He was discovered through the International Path to Professionalism program that the NFL created in 2017 just to try and find some of these freak athletes that could somehow be turned into some really solid NFL players. And
so this is like Kevin Bacon in the air up there. He's finding someone who's never played the sport before, but is just freakishly athletic. Maybe we can train this guy to play football.
Possibly. I've not seen the air up there, but it sounds...
I think it was before you were born.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. But obviously, it's one of these things where I think it's worth noting that this guy is 6'4", 306 pounds, and 6% body fat. We're back to U.R. Bernard, not either of us, LG. He had a 4.6 40-yard dash, a 39-inch vertical, and a 10'10" broad jump. All of those were the best in the event's history for a player over 300 pounds.
Yeah, that's definitely not me. I'm more like 7% body fat.
Yeah. But let me tell you, he's listed as a defensive lineman, right? So he could probably be put at the edge with that kind of speed and size. He said he really liked Aaron Donald and Myles Garrett. He actually measures almost the exact same as Myles Garrett, except slightly taller and 30 pounds heavier, but all of the same measurables are there in terms of bench press, broad jump, sprint speed. It is a ridiculous find with the 7th round pick. And if there's a team that's shown that they can make this investment work, it's the Eagles, because Jordan Mailata was somebody who had never played football before. He was a former rugby player, and now he's one of the best left tackles in the NFL. So if they could just tell U.R. Bernard, hey, that's the football, go tackle whoever is holding the football on the other team, then I think he could actually learn it. And one of the good things about getting these guys that have never played the sport before is they don't have any bad habits. So you can really kind of mold them like a ball of clay. So U.R. Bernard, somebody who I think, am I going to say or make any big projections that he's going to be someone like Myles Garrett, where he's obviously one of the all-time great players and somebody who has the single-season sack record? No, I'm not going to put those expectations on him. However, this is a very interesting prospect that I just wanted to touch on just a little bit, because it is a very unique situation where the Eagles have sort of proven that they can turn these guys into non-football players to all-pro, all NFL type players. And,
so you think this guy's going to see significant time on the field?
Well, the Eagles have been looking for somebody to sort of fill in. There was conversations about them going after Myles Garrett, and one of the things that apparently kept the Eagles from getting Myles Garrett in this draft, and the Browns were really pushing for, was that the NFL wanted to have a 5-year out rule for how far in the future you can trade draft picks. Currently, it's only 3 years, if I'm not mistaken. And either way, the Browns wanted to get as big of a haul as possible for Myles Garrett by having that rule changed, and that rule wasn't changed as far as I'm aware. So that was in the conversation that the Eagles were looking after Myles Garrett. So they're getting the consolation Myles Garrett here in Bernard. I meant to look up how old he is, but I imagine he's pretty young. He only started playing sports just a few years ago, kind of played basketball, but he is just a phenomenal athlete. And I wanted to touch on that story because I thought it was the most interesting thing to come out of the NFL
The dude looks
draft.
like a beast. You showed me some videos of him running around on the field, and yeah, he looks intimidating.
Very intimidating. And like I said, he needs to be trained in how athletics at a professional level work. But when you talk about somebody who gets this kind of opportunity, it kind of reminds me of a Giannis Antetokounmpo, where this guy is so grateful to be in this situation. He's going to work harder than guys who obviously have already worked really hard to get to where they are. But there's just a different edge when you're talking about a life-changing opportunity that has never been presented. Everybody who is in the NFL has been presented with a life-changing opportunity by just being able to go to college and play collegiately, which is now professional in its own right. We're going to talk a little bit about how the NIL world is changing the NBA world, but at the NCAA football level, this guy didn't have a chance to play at the NCAA level. Would have been interesting to see what would happen if, say, a Texas or an Oklahoma did get their hands on him and they signed him to a 4-year NIL contract. I'm very excited about Bernard as an Eagles fan, and I'm very excited to see if he can maybe become a solid, exciting football player. And yeah, you have Jalen Carter, you have Jordan Davis on that defensive line already. So you think that he's going to get a lot of one-on-ones, and he's just so physically imposing that I get the feeling he can make an instant impact for Philadelphia. I think that was a steal of a pick by Howie Roseman. So just something I wanted to touch on real quick. Bernard, remember the name. This is the starting lineup. I'm Karl Schoening along with LG. LG, this is where I just kind of want to refocus a little bit of attention to maybe the way the world has changed and the fact that we are looking at some of these guys internationally. But one of the things that really throws me off about the sport of American football going out to the other parts of the world is that Bernard will be playing against American football players in the American Football Olympics. Isn't it going to be an Olympic sport, or it's going to be a flag football?
Yeah, it's going to be flag football.
That's just not fair. We can't have an American-made sport that is only really played by Americans, and we send out the NFL players. Who's going to stop Bijan Robinson?
Well, that's kind of what they did with basketball when it first, the dream team.
That's fair. Maybe there will be a dream team effect here.
The world caught up, though. So maybe the world is catching up in football.
No. I'll tell you what. Going back to the last segment, talking about concussions, I think the rest of the world, football's a very expensive sport. You need 50 players probably. You're not going to have too many Ironman players. I think it's a good idea to try and spread the game as much as they can for football's global image.
That's the whole point of NFL London.
Yeah, well, it's America's pastime. It really is. I know baseball wants to claim that, but NFL football and college football is America. It is what we bleed for that the rest of the world doesn't quite understand. But I do hope that it catches on a little bit. And NBA is still going to be the hottest planet in the world. Soccer is still going to be the biggest sport in the world. But maybe football's making a little bit of a come around the rest of the world. We'll talk about that. It's an interesting story to keep an eye on. Bernard, remember him, 7th round pick by the Eagles. All right, when we come back, we're going to talk about that, how the NIL is changing the NBA draft when we come back on the starting lineup.
no excuses. Start your day with a starting lineup.
Wrapping up hour one here on Ticket 760. I'm Karl Schoening, your host here in the starting lineup. Also with me in the starting lineup today, LG. You can tag both of us on social media at On Air Karl. For me, that's Karl with a K, On Air Karl. He is at DJLG210. You can get in touch with us by commenting on our YouTube lives. We like to read what's going on live and all those good things. Do we have any comments, LG?
Yeah, one of our newest subscribers, Texas Latina 26, is up in here, and she says Wemby, she's talking about the Wemby and the concussion, he was not given a reason from the league why they did not clear him.
Oh, interesting. I read a lot of this, but I guess that would be sort of disappointing if you asked why you can't play and they just ghosted you or ignored you. I hadn't heard that.
I did hear that. Actually, Jim Rome was talking about that, if you remember that old guy. He was mentioning that Adam Silva needs to keep the lines of communication open for the future face of the league.
Yes.
Only makes sense.
Yeah, and as someone in the communications business, I don't like it when there's a lack of communication. There needs to be open lines of communication. It seems like an unfortunate event that could be a blessing in disguise. One less game of wear and tear where Wemby definitely has the full, I think it probably came out to around 150 hours to recover from when the concussion happened. So the Spurs built confidence without Wemby, which they didn't necessarily need, but that game 3 really was a memorable game. We'll always remember how Dylan Harper went off. Going to talk a little Dylan Harper a little later in the show. But on that note, sort of Dylan Harper, he was a very clear going to be top 5 pick when he entered the NBA draft. That is obviously ideal, and I think back in the day, if you were somebody who was fringe first-round pick, you really were okay with being a fringe first-round pick in the NBA draft because you were aiming to get to your second contract anyway. That's where the real money was. And the NCAA, there was the shady money rumors. There's never really any proof that we can say the third best player on an NCAA team was getting paid X amount of dollars. We still don't even have the ability to track that. It's all sort of, you hear that someone like even the University of Memphis is dropping $7 million on their team, and they end up going 7-7 the first 14 games of American Conference play. Yeah, ka-ching. I love that we are finally at this state where we can pay the NCAA players. They get more than just the scholarship because they provide that kind of value to a billion-dollar industry, which is NCAA. I still
think they need to take the scholarship away if they're making enough money to pay for tuition. Give that scholarship to someone who can't afford tuition.
I understand what you're saying, but it's not even about the education anymore.
It's not. It's about making money.
They're not going to classes. They're taking classes online. They are probably going to party and make friends within social circles. I think that that's actually a very important developmental piece for a lot of these young players is to be a kid. I remember thinking that about how there's all these professional paths opening up for players right out of high school, like when the NBA did the G League Ignite and this overtime elite and the various other leagues and opportunities you have, such as LaMelo Ball, who went to Australia. And I remember even Brandon Jennings all those years ago went to Italy. So there's opportunities available, but if you can realize the value of, I might be a second round pick and I'm just going to stay in college and play for Auburn instead of perhaps fight for my NBA career in the G League or not even get drafted at all. I saw a shocking number. This one really threw me off, as reported by Jonathan Givony, who is at Draft Express. He's been covering the NBA draft forever, and he says here that the NIL era is flipping the NBA draft on its head. Only 71 players have entered the 2026 NBA draft per the NBA, down from 106 last year And in 2021, it was at its peak of 363 players who entered the draft. And we're talking the early entrant totals here, because once you're done with your eligibility, you're automatically in the NBA draft. So if you don't have any eligibility left, you're in the draft pool. You're probably not going to get drafted anyway. But 71 players in the early draft means that's obviously the NCAA has become more lucrative. And I love that for those players. I think we've hit this point where if you're the third best player on a top 25 team in the SEC, if you remember Smurf Millender, UTSA fans, there were rumors that Smurf Millender, the way he played his sophomore season in college, which was here in San Antonio at UTSA, earned him a $700,000 contract for NIL with the University of Georgia. Is he really getting $700,000? I don't know. I don't think that there's any real financial proof online of what these guys are making before or after taxes from whatever companies are funding them or donors, which have you. But the fact that Smurf Millender might be getting near $1 million, and he's the type of guy that the NBA will take one look at and say, yeah, you're a nice player, but you're not going to ever play in the NBA. It's a thing of beauty. I love that that's the open market. If the NBA is now getting players who are looking more towards the let me finish out my early 20s and eligibility, I think that's better for the NBA product, because you're getting more mature players who aren't touching money for the first time in their lives when they get to the NBA. It's a very encouraging sign there, because I remember just when I was in college being friends with players at Texas State, they were scared to do things like go out to the square, our area where you would go out and drink, because technically if you bought an NCAA player a shot and someone found out in the NCAA, then or in the school and they reported you, you're ineligible until the investigation's done. It's guilty until proven innocent.
Nope. You can't even buy the man a burger.
Yeah, now, thank goodness, it seems like a lot of those things have changed. They're much more lax on it. Not a fan of the ability for players to bounce around like that, where, I didn't follow Smurf after his sophomore year with UTSA, which was last year. So this previous year, he was at Georgia. And I think the year before that, I can't remember where he was, but he wasn't at UTSA. So he went to 3 schools in 3 years. Yeah, and he was a roadrunner. He was a fun roadrunner too. But I think it's not good for what college sports should be if a player can go 4 schools in 4 years. PJ Hackerty is a great example. He was the American Freshman of the Year at Tulsa. Then he transfers to Memphis, so he transfers in the American. He goes off at Memphis as they're part of a top 25 program all year long, and then he joins John Calipari over at Arkansas, and I would imagine PJ Hackerty moved again. So this is something where if you're good, you're trying to get the next payday, and the next payday is no longer in the NBA or professional basketball, which I think is simultaneously great, and the consequences of how they can jump around is terrible for the NCAA. It's hard to build a relationship with these guys where it's like, hey, as a roadrunner, I love that we're going to see Smurf Millender for the next 2 years. No, you only saw him for that nice fun stretch that he had during conference play his 1 year in UTSA, and he's going to the SEC. And that's really sort of where you're going to see a lot of programs like UTSA just be the proving grounds to get a bigger bag. And that's how the world of the NCAA works. So yeah, just an interesting thing there where how the NIL has changed the NBA draft. Hour 2 of the starting lineup. When we come back, we're going to revisit the Spurs in Game 5 tonight against the Portland Trailblazers. Keep tuned in here on Ticket 760.
Here's your host, Karl Schoening.
Is the starting lineup on Ticket 760 or YouTube, however you are joining us. I'm Karl Schoening. Happy you guys are taking the time out of your day to tune in and listen to what I have to say about the world of sports. Joining me in the starting lineup today is the man who's making everything happen on the other side, LG.
Yo.
LG, I obviously think that you and I both are excited about tonight's Game 5, Spurs-Blazers, opportunity for the Spurs to win their first playoff game in a long time, first playoff series in a long time.
Yes. Since 2017.
Yeah. The 2018 series against the Nuggets was the last time the Spurs were there. They went 7, but they could not advance with DeMar DeRozan. That was the year DeJounte Murray tore his ACL. I was about to say, and DeJounte Murray. Forget about all the things that Spurs fans have gone through in the last decade and how sweet it is that Victor Wembanyama is a Spur, and the Spurs also have a franchise point guard in De'Aaron Fox, a franchise lockdown defender and playmaker in Steph Castle, a potential perennial all-star in a rookie like Dylan Harper, Luke Cornett. It has been a very fun series to see how everybody puts this whole thing together. I kind of want to start with Steph Castle, though. He is somebody who's really been an X factor for the Spurs in this series, because the way the Blazers have tried to guard Wemby in the 3 games that he's played is they have looked to put Drew Holiday or Tumani Kumara on Victor Wembanyama to slow him down, take away his potential to put the ball on the floor, and maybe send Donovan Clingan on a blitz when they can, which means that when Clingan, who is the 7-footer for the Blazers, leaves to double-team Wemby, he has to make a quick decision, find Steph Castle, who Clingan has been guarding, is at a mismatch, might I add, and make Steph Castle the playmaker. Here's the thing. I like that plan by the Blazers because even if that works, now you're making Steph Castle work harder, or you're asking him to become a spot-up shooter. So this way, when he does get the ball, he has to let it fly right away. Steph Castle, this series, is shooting 43% from 3. He is 9 of 21 from distance. And if you told me that Steph Castle can really find his three-pointing shooting stroke, that would be just the chef's kiss of what this Spurs team can do, because on the season, the regular season that is, Steph Castle only shot 43% from 3. So he has bumped up 10 percentage points here in the first 5 games of, or the first 4 games, I should say, of the NBA playoffs. And that's just, I think, when the moment comes to Steph Castle, he is ready for it. He will guard your best player, and if you're daring him to beat you, he'll beat you. He had that 33-point game in Game 3, which obviously was a game that the Spurs needed all hands on deck, and you get all hands on deck because Dylan Harper goes off. Steph Castle has a great game. De'Aaron Fox still contributed despite some fans not really liking his contributions.
They've all shut up.
Yeah, they really shut up after he dropped 28 points in Game 4. I think we've gotten a little 2K-ified in this league, where you think that the highest rated players should always go off, and even if they just a little more subtly contribute, it feels like they should be doing more. But
You got to trust the system, man. It's all
absolutely-
about the Spurs system.
you absolutely do. De'Aaron Fox is still averaging 20 points in 35 minutes in this series. Also 6.3 assists, the same amount of assists per game as Steph Castle in this series.
Ron Harper, Dylan Harper's dad, even jumped into Spurs Twitter and told everyone to shut up now about Fox.
As he should. Absolutely. Fox is shooting 36% from 3, which is pretty good. I think when you're talking about 37% plus, that is elite level shooting from 3. So Fox is just going off.
And he's making timely plays. He's being Mr. Clutch, the whole reason we brought him in. The whole reason the Spurs brought him in.
Yeah, and on top of that, he's still distributing with 25 assists. He and Steph Castle both with 25 assists through this series as the leading playmakers. Next Spur with in terms of assists in this series is 10 from Devin Vassell. So just the two guards in the backcourt. What is that? That's 5 and 4, 54, area 54. Is that a thing? Can we make that a thing, LG?
Well, area 52 is a thing for sure. There's probably a 54 out there somewhere.
It's area 52 is a thing?
Yeah, it's really a thing.
Well, the Slash Brothers is already the nickname for Steph Castle and Dylan Harper.
They can have another nickname.
Yeah, no, that's fair. White Castle might be my favorite when Steph Castle's out there with Luke Cornett. We don't see too much White Castle. Pineapple Express was a really good one for the duo of Steph Castle and Devin Vassell because of their hair. Yeah, I do like that. But going back to the series, the Spurs arguably could have swept. The 16-4 run at the end of Game 2 keeps this series alive after everything is said and done through the first 4 games.
Wemby said it should have been 4 and out.
Yeah, he did. He talked a little trash there in that Game 3 that he should have played, and that got caught on Twitter and went a little viral. Wemby, I love Victor Wembanyama. That man is sort of what the game of basketball needs. He is exciting, he's dominant, and he gets in your face, and he doesn't go out there to be friends with the opposing teams. He very much is what the game of basketball needs, and he could be too much of a good thing because in the series for the Spurs, in just 26 minutes per game, 26.3 if you want to be precise, Wemby is averaging 22.3 points per game, 7 rebounds, 1.3 steals and 3.3 blocks, as well as just under 2 assists per game. As he is also shooting from 3. Wemby is shooting 54% from 3. He only shot 1 of 4 in Game 4, and that was all in the first half. He went away from that, and that's the other thing I like about Wemby is if a team is sort of taking him away from getting inside, he finds ways to get inside regardless. And if his rhythm from beyond three-point range isn't there, then he decides that he's going to abandon it. He's not going to force it anymore. I'm very happy in the development of Victor Wembanyama that he's matured to realize that while he can hit those odd runners with one leg from 3, he hasn't made that something that we see like once every 10 games even. I don't even think I've seen it once this year. I've seen every Spurs game, but I won't say I've seen every single Wemby field goal attempt. And I don't think that he's really done that intentionally.
He's picking and choosing his shots now. That's for sure.
And it seems like he is very focused on being efficient as opposed to being unique. He's already unique enough.
He was definitely efficient on the defensive end, coming down with 7 blocks in Game 4. The last person to have 7 blocks in a playoff game, Luke Cornett last year.
Yeah, the Blockfather game.
At Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, and Wemby got all 4 of his steals in the series as well with those 7 blocks in Game 4. So 11 stocks, as we call it. He led the regular season in stocks, if I'm not mistaken. That is a combined total of steals and blocks.
Or as Sean Elliott would call it, dad blocks.
He does do a lot of that. That was so satisfying at the end of Game 4 when Wemby blocked Denny Avdia and collected the ball in midair and then gave him a look.
Right after the incident with Stephon Castle on the other end.
That'll be an interesting thing to see what happens tonight because the Blazers need Denny Avdia to play even better than he usually does.
I saw a high school clip of Stephon Castle where he goes up for the layup and he tries to hand the ball off to the opponent exactly like he did to Denny Avdia the other day.
It's a bit of a mind game. We talked about it yesterday, and I'm sure you've heard a lot of people say it. These guys get tired of each other after 4 or 5 games. If this went 7, you might see that chippiness evolve into something a bit more chippy, but we do have to give Avdia his credit. He's averaging 22.5 points per game, and he's putting up 5 assists per game, 7 rebounds. He gets to
the line a lot because he just puts his head down and bulldozes into the lane.
Yep, 43% from 3, although his free throw percentage leaves to be desired at 75%. But I'm pretty sure he leads the series in free throw attempts. He has 36 free throw attempts, which is by far and away the most on the Blazers. Let me double check the Spurs. The Spurs definitely They do have 25 from Steph Castle. So I knew Steph was getting to the free throw line, but very much still not close to Avdia, who has 10 more. So the Spurs tonight, though, the key really is to keep Avdia and Drew Holiday from going off. I think everybody else, if they get theirs, with the exception of maybe Scoot Henderson having a game, because that was the other reason the Spurs lost game 2, was Scoot Henderson had his best game of his career, arguably.
No way he drops another goose egg in game 5.
You have to give respect to Scoot Henderson. He went 0 for 7 from the field, and in 27 minutes, he was a minus 22 in game 4. You have to expect him to bounce back, so you don't want him to bounce back too big, but I'm just not really concerned about anybody else going off after Avdia and Holiday for the Blazers. So if the Spurs can jump out to an early lead and deflate that momentum from any momentum happening from the Blazers even more, then I think that the Spurs come away with the series victory tonight. It'll be great to give them plenty of rest while whatever happens in the Nuggets and the Timberwolves series wraps up. And then maybe in about a week, round 2 starts and the Spurs will be well rested. They earned that time off by finishing what they started and hopefully not having to take a 4-hour trip back out to Portland. Starting lineup continues here on Ticket 760. We come back. There is a new Rookie of the Year in the NBA. He was crowned yesterday, and I think some Spurs fans are going to be mad at the lack of love for Dylan Harper. Keep tuned in on Ticket 760.
Your ticket for the best Spurs talk. Back to the starting lineup.
That is right. We talk Spurs on this program. However, there's going to be Spurs mentioned in this, and it'll probably devolve into Spurs talk. But yesterday, the NBA named its Rookie of the Year, and I have some 2 cents to put into this conversation. I'm Karl Schoening, your host of The Starting Lineup, a local sports talk show here in San Antonio. LG is running the show. LG, say what's up to the crowd.
Yo, what up, crowd?
Yeah, you know, the interesting race in the Rookie of the Year, it came down to Con Knipple, who very much contributed to winning for the Charlotte Hornets. They didn't make the playoffs, which was a bit of a surprise. The Hornets were dubbed the team that the play-in was made for this year. But they ended up as the 9 seed. They have some sketchy things happen where they defeat the Miami Heat, and there was the argument about LaMelo Ball, should he have been suspended. They lose in the next game in the play-in tournament that they advanced to that would have won them the 8th seed, and Orlando rightfully, it seems like they're going to come away with the first round series upset in 8, defeating a 1. I haven't even gotten into that on the show, but Orlando very much rightfully ends up beating Charlotte. There was a question of who is the better team for sure going into the play-in tournament. I liked Charlotte. I didn't see them upsetting the Pistons. And I really didn't see the Magic upsetting the Pistons, but they're really starting to get it to click together. But this segment here, I want to talk about the difference between Con Knipple and Cooper Flagg. So Cooper Flagg, as we all know, probably going to be a perennial all-star, first overall pick, 19 years old, became the second youngest player to win the Rookie of the Year award behind only LeBron James. And Cooper Flagg, we knew it would be close. Turns out that all of the first place votes and all of the second place votes went to Cooper Flagg or Con Knipple. So that means the votes are flipped here. So Cooper Flagg got 56 first place votes, and 44 second place votes, while Knipple got 44 first place votes, 55 second place votes. And I beg your pardon, it wasn't flipped. Someone did vote Con Knipple third and gave VJ Edgecombe a second place vote. So those are the three players that finished in the finalists, and Cooper Flagg comes away and wins that Rookie of the Year award. And, you know, I get it because it's probably the right choice. When talking about the Rookie of the Year, who was the best first-year player? Cooper Flagg had back-to-back 40-point performances late in the season to sort of say, hey, this is my award. Con Knipple not only broke the three-point shooting record for NBA rookies, he broke Kemba Walker's single-season three-point record for the Charlotte Hornets. So he really was doing some crazy things, and he was contributing to winning while the Mavericks, if I'm not mistaken, they only won 23 games. They were irrelevant. I didn't really think that if you saw the Mavericks late in the season that they were going to be able to knock off anybody. They were at the level of the Sacramento Kings in a way, but they were very much letting Cooper Flagg do whatever he want to try and win this award. Con Knipple, the interesting thing about him is the discourse was, there was Kevin O'Connor, who writes for Yahoo, covers of the NBA. He has to do a talking head show like we're doing right here. And he came up with an interesting thought that, did the Spurs make a mistake drafting Dylan Harper over Con Knipple? And with the season that Con was having and how much the three-point shot is valued in the NBA these days, and how the general media world wasn't quite familiar with how good the Spurs wings are, because Devin Vassell, Harrison Barnes, Julian Champagnie, they're not all-star players. So is this a potential future all-star Con Knipple that the Spurs could have potentially drafted second overall to be better than those three shooting wings that the Spurs currently have? I see where KOC was going with it. However, despite all of the accolades that Con Knipple had, despite VJ Edgecombe and Cooper Flagg also putting up better numbers than Dylan Harper only got 5 third-place votes. He finished fourth, and Cedric Coward somehow came away with a third-place vote that obviously didn't go to Dylan Harper. So I have to question how much people underestimate how good of a season Dylan Harper had, because he is the Spurs' backup point guard. De'Aaron Fox, Steph Castle, both starting lineup players, and with Chris Paul going to the Clippers and the Spurs having Dylan Harper sort of fall in their lap by advancing in the lottery to the second overall pick, he from day one has been a really sixth man of the year candidate on top of rookie of the year candidate. So Dylan Harper, I don't think that he got enough love in this vote, LG. And
yeah, it's the lack of minutes.
Yeah, it's the lack of minutes and the lack of usage and those kinds of things. However, Dylan Harper, he turned 20 in March. And I know that this is a bit of a reaching stat, but I want you to think about all of the great teenagers that have played in the NBA. We're talking Tracy McGrady. We're talking Vince Carter, LeBron James. There's so many great teenagers that have played, Kobe Bryant, that have played in the NBA. Of those players that played in the NBA, some of them had full seasons to go off and do whatever they want. Dylan Harper has the NBA record for a teenager that scored at least 15 points, had 5 assists, and shot 75% or better from the field. And I know that that's sort of an obscure stat to lead the NBA in as a teenager, to be able to just meet the minimum of those numbers. It's really hard to both score 15 points and do it at 75% shooting on top of being a distributor in the NBA, much less as a rookie or a second-year player. And he did that in the first few months of his career. And that's not something that I think should have won him the award, but it definitely is among the things that you could probably point to where you can't say that the Spurs made the wrong decision by any means. And then I think a lot of the Spurs fans and even KOC admitted he was wrong for the take. After game 3, the Spurs fans really felt, hey, look at this. Dylan Harper going off, 27 points, 22 points in the second half, winning the Spurs a playoff game. That's not something Cooper Flagg can say. That's not something Con Knipple can say. VJ Edgecombe did help the 76ers win their one game against the Boston Celtics. So it's not a postseason award. I get it. However, there are things about, yeah, you're the rookie of the year. Yeah, you're putting up all these great numbers, whether you're Con Knipple or you're Cooper Flagg. Dylan Harper could be hoisting the Larry O'Brien trophy with the San Antonio Spurs, and he would be a major contributor as to why if the Spurs get there.
Come on, Dylan Harper accepted a role. He accepted the fact that he would be coming off the bench behind some arguably more talented guards. So the fact that he accepted that role and Cooper Flagg was basically just given the keys to the city. It's like, go ahead, here's a green light. Just go ahead and do whatever you want. Go for it.
This probably isn't the time or place to really get into it, but Cooper Flagg is the saving grace of that Luka Doncic trade because Doncic leaves Dallas. Anthony Davis comes in. Anthony Davis is already gone. So if it weren't for Cooper Flagg, they would have to have really doubled down on the Anthony Davis thing. So he very much does get keys to the city right away. Go crazy, be our franchise player, and do all of the fun stuff that we will let you do as the best player on a bad team. Get your stats, Cooper. And he's getting his endorsements as well. You're starting to see him. We saw him in that commercial with Larry Bird and the Emerald. That was interesting. And you told me that diamonds are essentially cheap, which was also interesting.
Not worth anything.
but then Con Knipple, very much the perfect piece to play next to Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball. Love that for him. Dylan Harper is kind of on par of a Derek White level championship piece where I think the Spurs have a chance to win the championship because of a player like Dylan Harper being in their rotation, in their lineup, contributing, playing high-level defense. Maybe you could argue Edgecombe is a better defender, but Dylan Harper is already an elite defender, which is hard for rookies to do at this day and age. Dylan Harper only getting 5 third-place votes, finishing 4th in Rookie of the Year conversation. I think we need a postseason revote. I'm just going to say it. I think Dylan Harper, by the time the postseason wraps up, will have had a better rookie year than Cooper Flagg or Con Knipple. But I digress. We talked a little NCAA earlier and how things are changing. The world is changing. Everybody is gambling now. Well, I'm not gambling. I don't think LG's gambling. You might not be gambling in the car, but a lot of people are doing it. And, that's something that I think we all need to look at in society and be honest with ourselves if we're involved with it. One of those, if you have a problem, call the number. And somebody did call the number, and he is a major player in the NCAA this year, and his status is up in the air. We'll tell you about that when we come back on the starting lineup.
day with the starting lineup.
Your day might already be started, but you're here on the starting lineup. Either way, we're happy you are doing so, whether it's via Ticket 760 or YouTube. I'm your host, Karl Schoening. We're based out of San Antonio, which means we also want to touch on a lot of things that are also happening in the world of sports in the state of Texas. And one of the more interesting things that came across the news wire early this week is that the biggest transfer portal quarterback, Brandon Sorsby, who was going to Texas Tech, is going to be taking indefinite leave as he is checking into a residential treatment program for a gambling addiction, Texas Tech announced on Monday. As I'm reading from ESPN, Sorsby's decision to seek treatment, according to sources, came in the wake of discovery of Sorsby making thousands of online bets on a variety of sports via a gambling app, which also jeopardizes his eligibility with Texas Tech. The NCAA is investigating Sorsby's gambling, according to sources, as the organization forbids athletes from betting on both college and pro sports. Texas Tech said in a statement that the university is committed to supporting Brendan through his recovery process and to ensure his long-term health and well-being. According to sources, Sorsby bet on Indiana football while redshirting for the Hoosiers as a true freshman in 2022, a season in which he played in a single game as a reserve. The bets in 2022, according to sources, were on Indiana to win, and none came in which the game Sorsby appeared. Welcome to the year 2026. We are dealing with, it feels like a big gambling story at least once a month these days. And, you know, LG, the man on the other side here, I think gambling has always been like this. We have a few things that factor into these stories becoming frequent. One of them is the 24-hour news cycle with social media. And the other one is the adaptation of gambling into our society, something that you and I grew up with, and it was like you were aware of it, but it wasn't, you had to go to Vegas.
Well, yeah, I didn't have a casino in my pocket that I could just pull out and be like, oh, well, let me go to the sports book real quick. Parlay all day. I had to go to Las Vegas to place a bet. Unless you had some kind of illegal bookie, you were at the sports book at the MGM Grand placing your bets. You weren't sitting at home with your feet up on the couch just betting on anything and everything, including like all these projection market stuff that they have like Calci. It's just ridiculous and out of hand now.
It is crazy, and I won't get into it, but it's going into politics, and there's things that are happening around the world that could be considered insider trading. I think what was the company what was the country that USA invaded? Was it Venezuela?
Yes,
yeah,
one of them. Yeah,
somebody who was in the invasion of Venezuela actually bet and won, I think, like $400,000 because he knew when it was going to happen. So obviously he gets hit with insider trading, not our politicians. I digress. I don't want to talk politics on this show.
That's a topic for another show and another station.
Yeah, I know a lost cause when I see one. I don't want to talk politics. However, I do want to talk about this because I hope Sorsby gets what he needs, but it seems unlikely that he will continue to play NCAA sports at all because this is something they take very seriously. Once he's out of his treatment program,
so he's going to be blacklisted. He's going to get the Pete Rose treatment.
It seems to be the way things are going to be going here on this world of if you are going to gamble, then yeah. But, I caught myself before I got addicted. I was very much I think, mid-20s, eager to make some money. I knew sports and the daily fantasy apps. I don't know which one. I'm not going to give out any free plugs by saying this is the one I went with. But it was a scenario where I drop $25. They give me $25. They want me to get hooked with that initial $50.
Yeah, they give you a little taste.
Yeah. And I lost all of that money. And at the end of that $50, I had a little thing in my head, a little voice in the back of my head that's like, I think you're getting this. You're getting the hang of this gambling thing.
Yeah.
And that was when I needed to stop, because if I basically ever got to the point where I went up a lot of money and then down a lot of money, then there would be a sort of voice in the back of the head. It's like, you can get that money back.
I can break even. What's one more bet?
Yeah. My dad had a little bit of I'm not going to say addiction, but he enjoyed betting on the ponies. And there were people addicted to betting on the ponies, the horses, the racetrack over here at Retama Park.
Yeah.
And there was a saying that my dad loved, and he'll say all the time, I hope I break even. I could use the money.
The house always wins. The house always wins.
Yeah. So, but it's a very big thing in this modern world right now. It's unfortunately, I think, is it an epidemic? Is that the word we're looking for? Of young men who are gambling what little money they already have because they think that they can win a 12-leg parlay. And that's unfortunate.
It's pretty difficult.
Well, I'm just throwing out.
I've hit on a 6-leg before, but it was difficult.
I'm throwing out an example, but that's kind of what these daily fantasy things are, where you say, hey, I'm going to find 12 players within that salary cap, and I can pick the 12 players. That's essentially the lottery ticket. And that's where I knew I probably could start to get the hang of the gambling thing. If I were to do that, I would have to find a free version of it so I could really have a no risk, no reward scenario to figure out that's how you do it. But
yeah, gamble responsibly.
Yeah.
And if you need help for gambling addiction, seek it out, please.
I believe the number is 1-800-GAMBLER. I hear it all the time. So yeah, very good on Sorsby to admit that he needed help. I don't know how it got discovered that he had gambled on his own team's games, but that's obviously a conflict of interest no matter what happens. Even if you say you only bet on them to win because you just had the feeling that they were going to win, it's not okay. I was talking to Mike Capps about this, the longtime radio voice of the Round Rock Express, the baseball team for the minor league. They shift around between either the Astros or the Rangers. I don't know where they are right now, but he was telling me that as this becomes more prominent, you're going to start to see these guys who are fringe professional players, or at least at the major league level, that know that they might not get another opportunity after their first 3 or 4 starts. Here comes a guy in a trench coat that hands him $1 million check and says, have a bad day. And next thing you know, the integrity is ruined a little bit. You hear about this potential happening in other areas where I think it's going to become a frequent story until we figure out ways to kind of curve it. I think the NBA's already asked all of their gambling partners to not make so many prop bets, such as being able to bet on Jonte Porter, who manipulated his lines by saying that he has to leave early with an eye injury. So anybody who bet on his unders won. So they also changed the rules on a lot of these sites where if a player leaves with an injury, it cancels bets and you get your money back. I think that's a good idea. But the point is, if you're gambling on your own and you are in control of it, good on you. If you are gambling and you're giving up money that you don't have because you feel like it's the only way to get more money, I pray for you. Go out there, and if you feel like you need help, find that help. Tell somebody who can give you the support that you need. It's a very serious topic that I feel like we should talk about it because it is relevant in the news today, and it'll continue to be relevant, LG.
That's true. And if you work or play for an organization in professional sports or anything that you can bet on, you probably should not be gambling on said sport or organization.
More of a reason for me not to do it. I enjoy what I do here, being involved with the professional and collegiate teams that allow me to be involved. I still stay at arm's length to where I don't know any inside information that could help in gambling, but I'm not going to say that people don't hit me up for it sometimes. But move on from that one. If you need help, find help. An NBA legend says, I'm not leaving. I'm not retiring. Figure out who that NBA legend is when we come back and his hefty price tag for his star player. That's why we're talking about a front office player and some NBA trade rumors as the offseason has already started for a lot of teams in the National Basketball Association. Starting lineup wraps up when we come back on Ticket 760.
to the starting lineup.
Starting lineup wrapping up here on Ticket 760 and on YouTube. I'm your host, Karl Schoening, starting as the voice coming through your speakers, starting as the man making our voice and music sound good, LG. On the other side, you can reach out to us on Twitter. I am at On Air Karl. That is Karl with a K. On Air, Karl, on Twitter and Instagram. LG is at DJLG210 on all social medias.
Yes, sir.
Time flies when you're having some good conversations, LG.
It does. I can't believe it's already been 2 hours.
Yeah, wrapping up here. But, time really flies when you're good at what you do. And you know who's really good at what he's done? If there's any figure in the NBA that I think is the godfather of the NBA, it's Pat Riley. He wears the nicest suits. He has the slick back hair. He kind of gives off a little bit of a mafia vibe, if you will. I wouldn't mess with him. I would be super polite if I ever had the chance to meet him in person. And he had one of his press conferences, which he likes to do after the Heat are done, but he kind of wants to be a little relevant and get his face back in the news. And he made it clear to reporters yesterday in Miami that he is not resigning, and that he remains committed to leading the franchise to its 4th NBA championship. Miami Heat president Pat Riley, that man is going to be in that seat until he is forced out or dies, and I love it. He said yesterday, "I'm not going to retire. I'm not going to resign," as he told reporters at his annual end of the season news conference in Miami. "I'm not going to step aside. When I came here almost 31 years ago, I have the same attitude as I did in that press conference on the cruise ship. Imagination, period. I want another parade down the Biscayne Boulevard. It may come, it may not." So the thing about that is Miami is very far from winning a championship. They have Bam Adebayo, who did break Kobe Bryant's 81 points in a game record, who now he is only second to Wilt Chamberlain's 100 points in a game. And somebody asked him, will you trade or will you consider trading Bam Adebayo in this quest for your 4th championship? And he said pretty unequivocally, as he should, no. And then he added, no? Yeah, exactly. No. And on top of that, he said, you need to give me 8 first-round picks and Wembanyama. So the Spurs are the only team that can trade for Pat Riley's Bam Adebayo, apparently.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
Yeah. Well, there's no way Miami's getting Wembanyama. There's definitely no way they're even getting 8 first-round picks for Bam Adebayo. I guess that's where the negotiations start. And if you ever tried to negotiate with somebody and you were so far apart that you had to laugh at their offer and then that ended the conversation, your laughter, LG?
Yeah, it happens all the time, actually.
Fairly regularly. No,
yeah, people will ask me to work some kind of job, and I'll say, yeah, I'll do it for $500,000. And then they'll just be like, and I'm like, okay, all right.
I won't name names, but there was a minor league baseball team that inquired for my services. And the thing about minor league baseball is they are notoriously cheap and a lot of work. They play 140 games in the minor leagues. I was asked if I would do their games, and I said I would need $150,000 a year. That's the only way I would not go crazy calling a baseball game every single day.
You make them an offer that they will refuse.
Yes. Yeah. And if they started to negotiate and I ended up somewhere around $100,000 a year to call minor league baseball, yeah, I would do it for sure. If they started to negotiate,
there's a price for everything.
If they started to go to negotiate around $60,000, I would probably have to turn that down because the thing about minor league baseball,
know your worth.
Yeah, you're staying in the 2-star hotels in these small towns that don't have a 3-star hotel. It takes 12-hour plus bus rides to get out there. You're at the ballpark every day. You are not only calling the game, you're probably your own audio engineer. You are, once again, calling all 9 innings every single day. Not every game's going to be exciting. Most of them aren't. You can't really determine how good a team is. You might be dealing with people you don't like every single day. I couldn't quite do that, but what I heard the eventual fulfillment place got was so far away from my initial joke of 150,000 or my I might settle for 60,000 that I'm glad I didn't continue the conversation. I'm glad they didn't continue the conversation because I could not do minor league baseball. But a man who can continue into the NBA until his dying breath is Pat Riley. I guess there must be rumors all the time about a team that's not performing in terms of, being a contender for several years like Miami. Does the president decide that he's going to step down? Pat Riley is not one of those guys that I think needs to step down, but I also think he needs to be a bit more realistic about the value of his guys. He won't move off of Tyler Hero or Bam Adebayo. I hope he gets Giannis. That would be a lot of fun. I would think that would be a good opportunity for Giannis to kind of go to South Beach and play with Bam Adebayo. Not really a contender, but it's a change of scenery. And I can tell you, if it came down to a city that starts with an M, I'd rather be in Miami than Milwaukee.
Well, this just shows that Pat Riley believes in what he's building down there in South Beach. He believes in the rebuild of this team. He believes in his new superstar that can carry them. And he probably has some little tricks up his sleeve that he's going to pull in this offseason to make that happen.
Yeah, I really liked their signing of Norman Powell. I thought that was a good signing as they took him from the Clippers and he became a first-time All-Star. They'll have a lottery pick this year. Jaime Jaquez Jr. was second in Sixth Man of the Year voting. Andrew Wiggins was a nice little way to kind of finagle a player that was on the move and contributes to winning. And then
he came over in that Jimmy Butler deal, right?
Correct. Okay. Yeah. Because Butler and Wiggins were traded for each other over to Golden State. But that almost is the question. Can Miami get Giannis Antetokounmpo in the offseason? And I think Pat Riley has that opportunity. But we're so far away from offseason moves actually being made in the NBA, but when it is that time, that is when I thrive. That is when this show is going to be really fun. The NBA Cold War is almost as fun as the NBA playoffs to me because we're talking trades, free agent signings, which have gone down a little bit in this new CBA world where players kind of stay with the teams that they're with. I love Summer League. That's certainly a exciting time where we get to see those draft picks. Love talking NBA draft and all of the things that go with it. And we'll see what happens to the Miami Heat. They're definitely going to be pulling for some ping pong balls when the draft lottery rolls around, which is in less than 2 weeks. And it feels a little weird not having any horse in the race for the Spurs in that draft lottery because the Atlanta Hawks swap is going to be the 20th pick. So the Spurs are going to draft 20th in this upcoming draft. They don't have to worry about the lottery in the first time in the 2020s. Wow. That feels nice, especially when talking about perhaps a championship in June. That would be great. Game 5 tonight starts at 8:30. Spurs try to close out the Blazers. I'll be on Spurs Radio Game Night with Dan Weiss. Tip-off from the Frostbank Center will be after 8:30. There's really 8:42 tip-off time with a 5-minute slide potential. Spurs look to close it out. Tune in tomorrow to hear all of our reactions right here on the starting lineup on Ticket 760. San Antonio's home for Spurs and sports talk. We're happy you guys joined us this morning. Have a good rest of your day here, San Antonio.